Today I'm going to show you how to make your own lighted fiberglass whip using a standard CB antenna. Now a little bit of backstory. As you may or may not know, in most off-road vehicle parks it is required that you have an orange safety flag above the top of your vehicle, so that way any oncoming vehicles behind you can still see you if you're on the backside of a rise. Now, that is very well adequate for the daytime hours, but what about a night ride? Well, on a night ride, the best thing you should do is to run a lighted whip. What this does is when the flag is unable to be seen because of darkness, you can use these LEDs here to light up a mast of some sort, such as a CB antenna or a fiberglass stick or something along those lines, and you can light it up and mount it to your vehicle and be seen at dark. Now, if you're wondering what this is a quick disconnect CB antenna mount. I'm using this so that way I can remove the antenna whenever I want to remove it from the vehicle. I'm going to be putting this on my Can-Am Commander. So I can remove this. In addition to that, I will also be putting a two-prong plug on the end of the LEDs here so I can disconnect them quickly from the vehicle. So that way I don't have to worry about cutting the wires or anything like that. I can just unplug it, untwist the disconnect, and take the mast off. So first we are going to start with this end right here. Now you can start wherever you want, but this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to start right here at the very, very end, and I'm going to follow these. Notice how the coils, which way the coils are turning. That will make it easier if you take and follow those with the LEDs versus trying to go across them, because it's going to want to take and turn your LEDs where you don't want them to lap. So I'm going to start to kind of follow these, and up here, as you see, this particular mast, it pretty much smooths out, and that wire pretty much runs straight up the length of it. So this one doesn't have a lot of coils like a lot of the newer ones does. This is an older antenna. This is probably about, I don't know, about 40 or 50 years old. It's an old one that none of us use ever, so it just kind of sits around and collects dust. So this is a perfect candidate to turn into a mast. This one is about 6 feet long. You can use any size you want, but first what you got to do is you want to find yourself some of these waterproof LED strips. You can buy these off of Amazon. They're like $8 or $10, and you get like a good 20 or 30 or 50 feet or something like that. Come on, camera, focus. Thank you. But they're fairly inexpensive. I mean, LED technology has come a long way, and as such, the price has come down quite a bit. This is not necessary. I just chose to do this. I mean, if you want to hardwire yours, you can go ahead and hardwire it. You can do whatever you want. I just don't want to take a nut off every time I want to take it off. I currently have a white fiberglass flagpole, and that one I have to remove a nut on the bottom just to take it off every time. So I don't want to do that anymore. So since I'm using a CB antenna, I use a CB antenna quick disconnect, so this should thread directly onto this without any problem. So let's go ahead and get it started. On the back of your LED, you're going to find some backing tape. This is made by 3M. It's a pretty good tape. But be careful, as it's essentially the double-sided tape. So when you go to peel this off, more than likely you're going to end up peeling off the sticky side from the LEDs versus the paper off of the other sticky side. I found that when I peeled it back, I just pushed it right back down, and I just gave it a couple little plucks with my fingernail, and it come right up. So what you're going to do is you're going to start peeling this back just a little bit at a time and begin wrapping it around the antenna. Now, the beauty about doing this yourself is you can make these as tight or as loose as you want. I mean, you can make your own kind of design. But as you notice, because of the way my antenna is made, I have this big lip right here. And I had to put a gap right here just to get it to go correctly on here. So my starter row, I got a little bit of a gap there. But as I went up the antenna, as that wire is becomes not so thick, I'm able to wind it really tight. Mine, I'm going to wrap real tight all the way to the tip. I'm going to get as many LEDs on here as I can. You can put as many or as few as you can. Just make sure to get a long enough spool. I believe this one here is like 30 feet or 50 feet, something like that. But you can do this any way you want to do it. You can even put 2 different strips on here, and like, I mean, for instance, you can put like one color here and one color here, or you can even do a third color here, and you can do like a red, white, and blue or something along those lines. But you can alternate colors up through here and just wind them amongst each other, you know, just kind of spiral them together, and then you just wire them all together down there. Or you can wire them on like a 3-way position toggle where you can change the color just by flipping the switch. But I'm doing mine all in blue. And it's going to be all a tight wrap all the way to the end. I'm not going to go slack on it, so I'm going to go ahead and put the camera down, as I'm doing this with one hand with the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and put the camera down and wind this up. Quick little tip is I'm not moving the spool around the antenna as much as I'm just rotating the antenna around and peeling back the adhesive backing as I work my way down the antenna. That way I get a nice, consistent, tight, decent looking wrap, and it'll look like it belongs that way. So I'm just rotating the antenna underneath the LED strip, and the LED strip is slowly unwinding because they're going to cover. This would have to go around a lot more times than the LEDs unspooling from the spool. So that's just a little tip: is you want to rotate the antenna, not the spool. So, and we'll just get along here and get right down to the end. Okay, there we have it. We have one antenna mast with an LED strip running all length, except for up here. Now, you notice my spacing, I started getting a little wider down here because I realized about here that I did not have enough on this spool to do the whole entire antenna, because most people I see doing these do them on a 4-foot antenna. This is a 6-foot antenna. But right about here I realized that wasn't going to have enough to finish, so I started spacing them out a little bit more to get up here. Now, if you notice, I stopped short of the end by about 6 inches or so. But that's okay, because still got to be able to put a flag on here. A lot of the flags are not going to have a slot big enough to fit over top of this, so that's fine. A flag will fit over top of this, and it'll just come down here and stop. No big deal. So for the most part, there's gonna be an orange flag on this anyway, so it'll be all right. That some of this is showing that it's not all there. Plus, if I was to attach this up and use it as a CB antenna, this is actually the load coil up here. This is where the transmission actually comes from the very, very tip. So this still can be used as a CB antenna. So you can put it on your UTV or ATV or whatever and still connect a radio to it. I'm probably not going to, but I have the option. So, especially since I'm actually using CB type hardware, so I can always hook it up. But if you wanted to, you can get a longer spool and make it actually go all the way to the end. See, I actually completely ran out, so no, not a big deal. At least I got most of it. So, but as you realize, I said early on, this has to be waterproof LED stripping. Why is that important? This is going to be out in the elements, and even if you heat shrink it, which I am going to do, I'm going to put a heat shrink tube on this. The heat shrink tube, essentially all it's going to do is just keep this from getting caught and peeling off of the antenna and undoing all your work. It's going to give it a protective UV barrier layer. It's going to make it be there forever. It's not going to come off that way. But once you put this on, you essentially want to waterproof it anyway, because if you look down here, you have a couple little copper contacts right here. You got a couple little brass contacts right here. Now, that's, once again, it's no big deal that it didn't make it all the way in. I could essentially get some more of this. If you notice on here, every so often, you have those little copper contacts. In between, there's a dotted line with some scissors. That's a spot where you can cut this LED strip. That's why I said, that's okay. It's not a big deal. It didn't make it all the way to the end. I could actually order more of this if I wanted to. And I could use these little copper contacts right here. And I can actually solder another piece on here. And I can extend this out further if I chose to. So, but I'm not going to, because I want to be able to make it to the flag actually fits on this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink wrap. I'm going to shrink wrap this just like it is, and that way it's going to be finished. And then all I have to do is install it on the vehicle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get the heat shrink tube and put this on, and I will actually take, at the end of this video when I post this up, I'm going to actually put a link right down here. I'm going to give you a parts list of everything I did, the exact parts I bought right down here, so that way you know exactly where I got this, how much it cost, and what length of LED stripping that I used, and what size heat shrink tubing did I use, and all the little bits and pieces that you might want to know about. So that is exactly how you make an LED whip. Okay, one more thing I'm going to do before I heat shrink it. I'm going to show you guys exactly how this works. Any guy worth their salt should have one of these power supplies. Look at that. How cool is that? Now I've noticed up there at the end where somewhere in the middle there, it kind of changes course, so I'm going to look into that a little further. I think all it is that the spacing just changed up there where it made it give it a little twist. So okay, next thing you want to do is you want to get some of this heat shrink tubing. This is 3/4 of an inch, and you want to slide it all the way over your antenna all the way to the end, and then shrink it down. Okay, once you have it completely sleeved on the full length of the LEDs, you can go ahead and apply some heat to this and shrink it. Everybody I have consulted with before about using this particular roll from the place I got it from, they've all done it with a hair dryer. They said it can be done, it just takes a little time. So go ahead and start shrinking it. Those of you who said a hair dryer cannot do this heat shrink, there's your proof. And then, once you're all finished, as you can see, she's all completely shrink wrapped. It's all nice and tight. All done with a hair dryer. Taken. Connect the power up. And make sure they all still work. Just that easy. Okay, if you're going to go with the hair dryer route, make sure you find a heat shrink that is a low temperature melt, such as this is around 100 degree melt shrink wrap. A hair dryer is right about 100 degrees. So if you start at one end and you keep the hair dryer at an angle like so, as you heat up that first section, right about the time it starts to shrink, the next section will start to heat up. So while you're working out the bubbles, while you're working out the bubbles in the area right directly in front of it, this area is getting up to temperature. So as you work your way down, you'll just be working out the bubbles all the way down as you're warming the heat shrink tube ahead of you. So that way, once it starts, it takes about a good 5-10 minutes to get it started. But once you get started, you just work your way slowly down the whip, and it'll actually shrink all the way down the whip. It only took me about a half hour, start to finish, to include actually going back over this again, making sure there was any spots with any bubbles, and any bubbles I found, I just touched up with the hair dryer and just kind of heated them up a little bit more and got them to shrink down. But it took me about a half hour start to finish to do the whole thing. And this is about 5.5 feet of tubing to shrink. So you can do it with a hair dryer as long as you get a low temperature heat shrink tube. This I got off of Amazon. It was like $8 with a temperature of about 100 degrees to shrink it down. Found a few other people on there that said that they use this and they use the hair dryer and it worked pretty good. So I will go ahead and post a link for this stuff right down here. And just so you, in case you want to know, this is the kind of hair dryer I used. I use a Conair 1875. Just a standard hair dryer, no big deal. You can get these at like Walmart for like 20 bucks. So there you go, one LED whip.